On November the 10th, 2017, 3 members of a family were poisoned after consuming the meat of a contaminated wild boar. This is their story.
Shibu and his family consumed wild boar on Friday the 10th. Friday the 10th of November. Now, initially there were different versions as to when they had their dinner, because the elder daughter seemed to have one idea when they consumed it. Things weren't exactly, we weren't very sure about things till Shibu woke up, and his memory was very unclear to start with, but now it was quite patchy in the beginning, but now it's falling into place. And but he's pretty sure that the cooking process started at about 9 o'clock in the evening, and they would have consumed it by about 10 o'clock, after which the family went to sleep. Now, because it was so late, the children were put to bed earlier, say around 7ish, and they did not consume any of this meat. They had chicken instead. So the other 3 family members had their helping of wild boar. Because they went to sleep, they're not exactly very sure about when they started to get sick, but we do know that the first person that got sick was Shibu's wife, Subi. This would have been about 2 in the morning, roughly. And it all started off as vomiting. Now, naturally, the elder daughter woke up, and there was a lot of chaos there, with people running back and forth between the toilets and a lot of vomiting going on. And finally, Shibu decided to call the ambulance or health services. By the time they arrived, which we do not once again know the exact timing, but they reckon it's somewhere in between 3 and 4 a.m. 2 of them were already down, which is Subi was down, and Shibu's mother was also completely knocked out, unconscious. Shibu was in a state of he was crawling on the floor, still conscious, if you can call it that, but was finding it really hard to focus his thoughts. In his own words, everything was spinning so much that he just couldn't focus on things at all. Just random words coming out. And yes, the ambulance spent roughly an hour there, is what we understand, and then they were moved to Tokoroa. And by late afternoon on Friday, they were brought to the Waikato hospital. Initial diagnosis of the initial diagnosis was around botulism. The reason they went for it was because there was progressive paralysis from head down. So they were blabbering something, even if not speaking. They were saying something. Their eyes were moving when they were brought to hospital, but one by one it started to shut down, and the doctors arrived at this decision that it could be, we may be looking at botulism. And then they administered the antitoxin for it.
How quickly
did they administer the antitoxin? Well, see, from the time, let's say that they were taken to Tokoroa at 5 in the morning, they got to Hamilton late afternoon. So we're talking about 12 hours since they were taken, and that this was administered, that the antitoxin was administered. Now, what we were told in our conversations with the doctors was the antitoxin took effect within 30 minutes or so of being administered, which is odd for the botulism antitoxin, because it takes more time to work. And in this case, it was almost, we could say, instant.
Why did the doctor say that?
Yes, because these were the confusions around, because till date no one is sure. Nobody in the DHB will say hands on heart that it is botulism. While it demonstrated some of the symptoms, it ticked some of the boxes, it hasn't ticked all the boxes thus far. So what if it is a typical case of botulism, we were told that the antitoxin would take longer to work. But in this case, that progressive paralysis stopped within about half an hour or so of the antitoxin being administered. Which was the first big question mark in this whole thing. Are we looking at the right track? From then on, there has been no further administrations of antitoxin. It was all treatment to
Treatment for the symptoms. Yeah, whatever
yes,
occurs.
symptomatic treatments, keeping them alive on a day-to-day basis.
Beyond that, for the next few days,
Mhm.
did they continue to show improvement, or did they? What happened?
Well, the situation, you could say it actually went bad from there. It deteriorated from there because though they managed to stop the paralysis, they became increasingly aggressive. Even in a state of unconsciousness, they were struggling. There was involuntary muscle spasms, to the extent that they had to be restrained to their beds. So they were thrashing around, and these are things we are told are completely inconsistent with a botulin poisoning or botulism.
Did these effects take place over a short period of time? For example, only for 2 days afterwards for a couple of hours, and then that was the end of it, or did it lag on?
Well, the onset was of this thrashing around, this involuntary muscle spasms. The onset was, I would say, roughly a week.
Yeah.
I would say roughly 1 week down, and that continued on for another week and a half.
Yeah.
I would say, yeah. That's till they woke up. That continued on. We saw in Shibu's discharge notes that the first batch came back negative for botulism. We don't know where it came back negative from. Was it from within New Zealand, or was it the Australian batch that came back with negative results for botulism? But then further investigations are being done on botulism itself. Every time we ask a question, we're merely told it's been sent away for testing. It's been sent away, which is what's been sent away, where has it been sent away, when has it been sent away, why is it taking so long? One of the vague responses we got when we asked why is it taking so long is we were told they have to replicate the exact conditions to recreate a culture, and that might take between 2 and 3 weeks. Then we were told there are multiple strains of botulism. They cannot all be tested for at the same time, so each strain might take 2 or 3 weeks to test out, but this is just dragging on and on.
On November the 20th, TB Wild submitted a request for information to the Waikato District Health Board. TB Wild asked for the results of tests undertaken for pesticide residues. The request was declined, and privacy reasons were cited. After obtaining family consent, TB Wild once again asked for the results to be released. The DHB responded by stating, "We will have a reply back to you by the 29th of January 2018, if not sooner."
Did any of you witness the effects? What could you explain exactly what you saw?
Their eyes were open. It wasn't it was almost like they couldn't shut it, so it was open all the time. It was bulging, bloodshot red eyes, and
they were like throwing the arms and legs all.
it was like struggling and
pulling.
pulling against their bed, their restraints. We were told it took 3 or 4 nurses to actually hold them down before they were restrained, and all of this was completely involuntary. And I've seen the grandma, Shibu's mum. She was randomly her legs would actually flip 180 degrees, on the bed, just go backwards, and that, all of that was, and there was a huge possibility of her hurting herself because against the side of the bed and stuff. So hence the reason why they had to be restrained. But yeah, all that thrashing around was not expected.
The symptoms of botulism are clearly defined and state that paralysis is experienced and muscles cannot contract.
We were told that there were samples sent away, blood samples sent away for testing, well, for possible causes. But there's been no positive results on anything. We were told they were tested for various poisons as well. I do know that the doctors were in touch with the Center for Disease Control in the US, CDC. CDC has one of the world's largest literatures on all kinds of diseases globally. It's all reported back in, and they wouldn't say it's botulism either.
Do you know, have you been told about other poisons? Is there any record of that?
Only things that we have been told. There's no written record of anything, but we've been told that they've been tested for mercury, arsenic, lead, and what's the other thing? Asbestos, I think it was. Yeah. They did mention pesticides and insecticides, I think. There was a name used for it, organophosphates or something of that nature. They did say that was tested for as well.
But they didn't. Did they mention 1080 poison?
We asked if it could be 1080, and we were told no. They would basically have to eat 1080 out of a bowl, like as if they were eating breakfast cereal, for it to have this sort of impact. So it was dismissed.
Around 2 million kilograms of 1080 poison bait is spread by helicopters across New Zealand's forests and waterways every year. Enough poison to kill over 60 million people every year. The factory that imports 1080 poison and manufactures the baits is a state-owned enterprise. The two acting shareholders are the Minister of Finance and the Minister of Primary Industries. Its warning label states that a lethal dose of bait for an adult human could be as little as 30 grams. That's equivalent to just 2.5 of these 12-gram baits. Animals like deer and pigs can consume many more baits than is required to kill them, making their dead bodies massive toxic baits for any bird, animal or person that eats them. The latency period, which is how long it takes the victim to feel the effects of the poison, can be as long as 29 hours, meaning a live animal could be harvested for food while containing a fatal dose of poison. The symptoms of 1080 poisoning include vomiting, stomach pains, muscular twitching, blurred vision, mental confusion, followed by coma and convulsions.
So it's been 35 or 36 days since this event has happened, and there is still no confirmation or no positive results on what caused this, which I find extremely strange, because in this day of technology and science, to not being able to find out or say conclusively what caused this, it's super strange. Also being told that the facilities are not available here, they have to be sent away to Queensland. I seriously don't understand how this works. Let's put it this way. Shibu is not in New Zealand by force. He has the means to, and he is. They are pretty comfortable in their homeland. He's also worked in the Middle East before he came here. One of the reasons why he chose to settle down in New Zealand, and I suppose one of the reasons why most of us decide to settle down here, is this is one of the most cleanest countries on the planet, and you get good food, which are, I mean, the rules and regulations around use of pesticides and insecticides is well regulated. So that's one of the big reasons why we want to put roots here. And having said that, one of the statements the doctor said is, we might never know what caused this. We might just have to live with that, not knowing. That is just not good enough. Especially with when we know that there are poisons being dropped that can have that are controversial, for lack of a better word. I think it is important to test for those poisons. If they cannot confirm botulism, then they should at least be able to say what it is, and let them go through all the battery of tests, and be it for botulism, 1080, arsenic, lead, whatever it is, let them go through that battery, let them all come back negative, and then we will accept the statement that we might have to live with not knowing, but not before those tests are done.
In 2001, a study undertaken by Landcare Research found that 78% of wild game animals contained brodifacoum poison residues. And in a recent study undertaken by Landcare Research states that 78% of road-killed hawks had at least one anticoagulant poison present in their carcasses. In 2015, an Official Information Act response from Auckland Council showed that 13 out of 14 pigs tested positive for brodifacoum poison.
Was there any contact from officials, MPI or medical staff, saying, look, we need access to the house, we need to access the food products that were in there that may have caused this? Was there any of that?
Well, we there was no one's asked us those questions. We have had no contact from any officials as such, but we do know that Public Health Services was in the house. they've actually gone in. They have touched base with Shibu's neighbor. They kind of like live in the same house. It's just two parts to it. They have touched base with the neighbor. The neighbor had Shibu's house keys. They have let people in from the public health services. They have collected samples of just about everything that was there, is what we are told. I did not witness it myself. When it's our pick, because Shibu remembers vividly. He remembers leaving this pan of meat, and there was also a bowl of fish curry on the stove. Now, when we went with them back a couple of days back, both these things had found their way into the fridge. So someone's actually moved them into the fridge, but different. And Shibu also had a chest freezer in his bedroom that was full of game meat that was given to him by different sources or different friends. Though Shibu is not a hunter as such, I mean, he does not have a gun, nor does he have a gun license, nor does he have any facility in his home to hang meat, so he cannot process it there. But he's a keen outdoorsman, so he tags along.
Yeah, he goes out with friends.
So he's his share of meat from all these different trips. There was a chest freezer full of game meat, and they've taken away all of that.
And this particular meat, do you have any idea where that one came from? Would it be something that may have been previously frozen?
It was definitely previously frozen. He remembers acquiring meat from, well, this is what he says, in the 2 weeks preceding this event, there was aerial spraying of 1080, quite extensive, and there was talk between friends in the town, that this isn't the best time to go out hunting and stuff, just let it die down. Apparently there was also one incident of someone's pet dog going out for a run and then just died. So there was a kind of a, let's stay away from this, from hunting during this particular season. And then there are a couple of sources that he got meat from during that 2 week time frame. He hasn't, either he doesn't remember, or he hasn't mentioned it to us anyway where it is. It's one of those batches that he picked up.
1080 poison bait is aerially spread across large areas of New Zealand's forests and waterways to kill possums and rats. However, the toxic baits also kill thousands of pigs and deer annually, and poisoned animals can suffer for many hours before they die. Many species of native birds, bats and insects also consume the poisonous food. The poisoned insects and animals can then become toxic meals for unsuspecting native wildlife, and official information shows that kiwi and kea are dying in high numbers in poisoned forests. 1080 poison baits are dropped directly into all waterways at the same rate as the land areas around them in most aerial operations. Aquatic life, such as freshwater crayfish, quickly consume the bait and pass the deadly toxin onto other unsuspecting birds, animals and fish that eat them. The manufacturer's warning label states, "Take measures to minimise the chance of baits accidentally entering any body of water and harmful to aquatic organisms." However, no attempt is made to avoid waterways. The official toxin distribution charts show that almost all of the forest streams are poisoned at the same rate as the land areas around them.
It's only now that we have the ability to sit back and go, okay, what started this off in the first place? And whether we're looking into it. Now, suspicion number one was when we took Shibu and his mum back to their home. It was pretty much in the same state that it was left 35 days back. So there was bread on the table, there were fruits on the table, stuff in the fridge, all of which had just about gone rotten. And this meat in question, the one that was pan fried, it was pressure cooked first and then it was pan fried. That's the Indian way of doing things. And this meat still looks as if it was cooked a couple of hours back. That's the only thing in the house that has absolutely, it still looks pristine. If you didn't know what it was, you could just read. Yeah, that longevity of meat, I've only seen where preservatives and processing of food has been done, or meat's been done. You can see that type of longevity in the meat. But this was game meat. There's been no processing, no preservatives added to it. Just to see it there 35 days later, just looking the way it is, it's quite shocking. anything cooked with carcinium, you can leave it out there for roughly 4 or 5 days, and it just holds the flavor. That fish had gone moldy. Yeah, but this meat is still pristine.
Was that fish in the fridge?
Yes, it was. There's nothing special about the fish. It's just regular snapper.
Could there have been any other product in the curry mixed with it that may have caused something like this, do you think?
Nothing I can think of, because we actually cook it just like Joji said before. We actually put it in pressure cooker, and then we cook it for like more than half an hour or 45 minutes. That's like way well cooked. No matter what meat it is, by that time it would be like very well cooked.
So the meat's actually put in there initially into a pressure cooker just to make certain that any possible contaminant. That's how they used to sterilize medical equipment before. In the early 90s, it was all done pressure cooked. Was how they sterilized medical equipment. We still follow the same thing just to make certain that the meat is cooked right through, well done, and there's no bacterial contamination to it. And because the spices get destroyed under such heat, 125 degrees plus in a pressure cooker, the spices would just get destroyed, all the flavors gone out. So then the pressure cooked meat is then transferred to a pan, and that's when all the curry powder and all the spices are added. That's a normal form.
There are like 2 stages of cooking, so it gets cooked twice. So we can't really think of anything surviving that sort of
that sort of battering.
You're pretty sure it was a wild pig?
She was pretty sure it is. Yeah, because that's the only meat that he keeps in his deep freezer. It's all game meat.
.1080 poison baits are spread across most of New Zealand's state forest parks. Apart from the targeted animals, the poison also kills thousands of wild pigs. The pigs are either killed by eating the baits directly or by scavenging the poisoned animals that litter the forest floors. Poisoned animal carcasses are left to decompose where they fall, be that on land or in water, despite the manufacturer's warning label stating that they are ecotoxic and that the exposed bodies of all poisoned animals should be collected and buried at a landfill approved for hazardous wastes. This scavenging poses a secondary poisoning risk to native wildlife or to hunters that may catch a pig that's travelled outside of a poisoned area weeks after an aerial operation.
It was Shiva's mother that started to come around first, because she's not much of a meat eater. She prefers fish to meat. So by her own admission, she had 4 pieces, and that's it. Just 4 cubes of curried or fried meat. That's it. And she started to come around first, so she stopped thrashing around first. Then there was a time where, in terms of symptoms, it went from being completely out, almost in the state of a coma. I wouldn't say a coma because sometimes their eyes would be open, but completely immobile. From that, it went to a lot of thrashing around to the extent that they had to be restrained. From that, it moved to they stopped thrashing around, and then there was a phase where they would behave quite like children. Smile at nothing, laugh at nothing, just giggle away. That sort of a situation. And then they started to recognize people and come around slowly. That process took a while. One of the first things he said when he woke up, I think he started off with, "I am thirsty." Okay, I want water. And he kind of like consumed massive quantities of water when he woke up. And then pretty much within 24 hours, he was going, I'm in great agony, I'm in a great deal of pain. We thought it was because of all the struggling, the straining against the restraints that was put on him and stuff. All his muscles would have been stretched to their limits. This went on for a period of a week and a half, so we thought it would be fatigue from that's causing the pain. And then the pain kind of like died away. Then his time in rehab he spent 1 week here at the hospital in rehab. Once again, the pain was controllable with normal medication such as paracetamol. Now that he's back home, he finds himself tired, extremely tired most of the time, and also aches and pains, continuous aches and pains that will not go away.
quite a traumatic experience for both of you, to say the least.
Yeah.
And can you share anything of just the impact it's had on you guys and the family, the kids?
The kids, I suppose we'll start with the kids. They definitely wanted to see their parents, but how do you show kids this thing? It was scary enough for an adult. We didn't want to expose the children to that, so we kept telling them, and they believed that their parents were vomiting a lot, because that's what they saw at home, and so they're continuing to vomit, and hence the reason why they're in hospital. It was the amount of things that we had to deal with, just the sheer number of issues that we had to deal with
At the same time.
It was just I'm glad we were over that now.
Yeah.
It was just seriously hard. And the children have been sent back to their grandparents so that the parents can kind of recover with a bit of space.
In India?
In India, that's correct.
So we
had to put visitor control into place. But in terms of saving lives and looking after them, they have done a stellar job.
Yeah.
I mean, I could praise them all day long, and that wouldn't be enough.
Just in regard to Icc, what have you been informed by Icc, or how were you informed, or how soon, about whether they would cover this?
So in the last 35 days, we've had 5 different meetings with various multi-organizational meetings, and it was all around how to look after the children and aid for the family. We received a lot of advice and support from various institutions as well. ACC was invited to be a part of those meetings. They did not turn up for the first 4, but then they were represented by a team leader on the 5th meeting. He had basically very little to say. He said if it's a case of botulism, it's an open and shut case, because legislation says that the intake of a bacteria will not be considered for eligibility unless it was a criminal act. I did put it to him that there is no test whatsoever that have come back positive for botulism. How would they treat the case then? And I was told in which case we would just go by what treatment was undertaken. So in this case, the only treatment as such provided was the antitoxin for botulism, and therefore they would make up their minds that is what it is. To me, that has 2 serious flaws in that argument. One, none of the doctors will state, hands on heart, that it is botulism. True that they administered the antitoxin, but they do not think, or they will not state on the record that had much to do with their recovery. And 2, this reeked of a predisposition from the side of another part of ACC. And while the paperwork is still on, the decision is still pending, just to come out with that verdict even before any of the information was collected, it just seemed reeked of predisposition, and hence the reason why we decided to go public with it.
And ACC, what was their conclusion?
The process is still on. They haven't come back with a verdict. Interestingly, I saw the letter sent out from ACC to Shibu. It said, we will get back to you at the earliest by the 15th of March 2018, which is 3 months. One does tend to wonder, how slow do the wheels turn? What sort of information are there after in 3 months? What's involved here? Fortunately, we don't get the answer to any of these questions.
Just, do you know how ACC works in New Zealand?
I've read as much information as I can on Google about how this works. I know that they collect funds from just about most financial transactions that a New Zealander is involved in, wages, salaries, goods and services. There's an ACC levy built into these things, and that's as much as I know about where they get their funds from, and they cover, of course, accidents.
One of the more concerning trends of this awful event has been the relentless insistence of national media to continue to attribute this poisoning event to botulism. Within hours of presenting, the patient showed symptoms inconsistent with botulism poisoning. If all potential toxins were not tested for during this event, then the possibility that this was a criminal act cannot be ruled out. In 2016, a poison industry businessman was jailed for threatening to put 1080 poison into infant milk formula. The Waikato District Health Board was asked to comment. It declined. Research presented at the Environmental Risk Management Authority review of 1080 poison use, undertaken in 2007, stated that it identified three main scenarios that may give rise to meat containing 1080 residues. Farm animals may accidentally get access to 1080. Feral animals taken by hunters may have been poisoned or sublethally poisoned. In other research, it is stated that numerous cases of suspect accidental poisoning of livestock with 1080 occur in New Zealand every year. Extensive independent information about 1080 poison use in New Zealand can be found on the 1080science.co.nz website, and an extensive presentation of film footage of aerial poison operations and documentation can be found on tv-wild.com.